Hello and welcome to another episode of Autogefühl, today with me AJ and Jonas. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a closer look at the all-new BMW M3 in the competition version.
Floor it, go to the high-speed lane. Oh, bam! That's 180, 190 right there. This engine is a gem. It's so energetic. It's so lively.
Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? These big grills. Well, we saw this on the 4 Series before, but now even the M3 gets these large kidney grills. I don't think it's apt to call them kidney anymore. They're more like lungs. But I actually like this now. It's grown on me. I know there's a lot of debate regarding this, but especially here in the M3 with these really aggressive bumpers, a lot of aerodynamic channels, this does also not have that frame around the outside, and because of that black color, it looks really menacing, especially with these hood scoops, or rather these indentations. It looks really muscular. It's almost, it's very Atari, very anime, very futuristic. What do you guys think of the front design? Of course, you get the optional laser lights over here, very sleek, and overall, there's no way to ignore this car if you ever see it on the road. Let's take a look at the side profile. Of course, the first thing you'll notice are these really gorgeous wheels. As is the case with previous generations, the front are narrower and they're 19 inches. The rear are 20-inch wheels and they have a wider section as well. More aerodynamic channels, like for example from the front bumper, the splitter, it creates an air curtain around the side of the wheels. There's also air channeling under the chassis to suck the car closer to the ground. M Competition badging on the left-hand side here. Carbon fiber outside rear view mirror cap. The optional carbon pack. Black skirts for the sides. And a very sharp crease here for the design line. One running through the top over the door handles, and another crease coming down this way. Very aggressive, very athletic, really nice sloping roof line, and carbon fiber roof as standard. Both the M3 and the M4 are pretty much the same platform, so the wheelbase is the same. The M4 is a little bit lower in terms of height, but the sedan version is the M3, so the back is quite different than the coupe, and of course you get additional doors. And of course, my favorite part of the M3 are these flared wheel arches. Just gives the car a great stance on the road. On the boot lid, we have a carbon fiber spoiler. Very subtle, but of course, since it's in carbon fiber, it does stand out. M3 competition badging over here. The tail lamps are also really nice, very sleek, LED. In the M3, they curve upwards, as you can see, but in the M4, there's a little bit of a dip as it then curves around the side and then rises. Further down, a gorgeous carbon fiber rear diffuser and, of course, twin exhaust pipes, so quad pipes, 2 ports on each side. In fact, the M3 and the M4 are pretty much the same platform, so they have the same suspension. They come as standard with the same 6-piston brakes, sports suspension, and these sports exhausts are standard, and they sound fantastic. Let's take a look under the hood. And this is one of my favorite engines of all time. This is the S58. But of course, for this new generation of the M3, it's been revised. It's been improved even more. For example, with a lighter crankshaft and such. In the standard M3, it makes 480 PS or metric horsepower. In the M Competition, like we have here, it makes 510 PS. The M3 and the M4 can be had with a manual and it's only rear-wheel drive. The M3 or M4 Competition comes only with an 8-speed automatic, but you still can choose between rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. 0 to 100 for the standard M3 or M4 is about a little bit over 4 seconds. For the Competition, it's just under 4 seconds, around 3.9. Getting inside, well, to be honest, I would have liked a little bit more, to feel a little bit more special. I wish it was a little bit fresher. This is very BMW, which is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel as different. So the front and the outside, the way they've made that completely new and it's so radical, that does not translate on the interior, in my opinion. Nevertheless, you have a very familiar steering wheel, which we know works really great. Nice and chunky. We'll take a closer look at what it can do. You have a screen for your virtual cockpit, your digital instruments, as well as a screen over here. This is 12.3 and this is 10.25 inches. A lot of buttons here, so really happy to report that. And you're sitting really low down, very snug. Of course, I like to keep the seat all the way down. This is an M3, should always have the seat in a very low position so you get a good overview and it's a very sporty feeling. So therefore, plenty of headroom. This carbon fiber roof can be swapped for a panoramic roof at no extra charge, but I think it goes with the aesthetic. The roof liner is all black. There's a lot of black up here, although materials are good and soft touch. Nice texture over here for the vent and nice textured inlays as well. But I think this orange color, now I understand, it really pops. There's some other options if you don't like orange. But yeah, apart from that, the rest of it is still a little bit so-so. Like I said, not really anything new. This is the M steering wheel. This actually is a progressive steering rack, which means that the more input you provide, the rate of steering increases, so it makes it very dynamic to drive. Heated steering wheel button over here. Now this version does not have the advanced driver assistance systems in terms of the radar cruise control. There's a standard cruise control here, which you can control with this button over here. This is for the media system and your telephone and the menu for the head-up display, which by the way is really good. You can even see navigation on the head-up display, and I think that's very useful. But the talking points are 4 little tabs. One is the M1 over here, which is you can set what this function, with this button will do, but basically you can choose the different parameters for the engine, the suspension, the steering, and the braking to Sport, Sport Plus, or Comfort, and you can set up your own M1 and M2. Speaking of which, M2 is over here. Generally, M2 is the more hardcore racetrack-only version. And then, of course, behind them you see the paddle shifters for the 8-speed automatic gearbox. Here you see the 12.3 digital instrument screen. I'm not so sold on the idea of having the rev counter running the opposite direction, anti-clockwise, but at least when you go to the M mode, the view changes a little bit, and then it's still a little bit strange. It's not the conventional kind of tachometer, but it's a little bit better. But you get a lot of useful information, including traffic sign recognition, navigation controls. You can also toggle between different options here to see, for example, engine temperature and G meter and so on and so forth. So a pretty useful display, but not as complicated and not as configurable as some of its competitors. This is the 10.25-inch touchscreen for the main infotainment. Really reactive, really crisp colors, a lot of nice contrast. You can, of course, control, you can have different media. It's also a connected car, so you can put a SIM card and stream internet services. You can also connect your phone with wireless Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay, which is pretty cool. And overall, yes, we've been driving for a while now. We've been getting really terrible numbers, 17.4. But in reality, we've been pushing it really hard. I can assume you can expect numbers around 10 or 11 if you're going to be driving on the highway. It really depends. But being the M3, when you drive with a spirited right foot, the numbers are going to be pretty terrible. But on the whole, really nice system. Again, nothing new, but it works, so why fix it? Being an M car, one of the cool features of this new version or this new generation is this M drift analyzer. So you can click on this and you can activate this, and it will tell you, for example, how many drifts you made, how long you held each drift, what was the length, or how long in terms of distance, as well as the angle of the drift. You can also change, and this is really like magic, you can change the traction control, the special M traction control, from 0 all the way up to 10. And this is with zero intervention, where a novice like me is just going to spin the car. And we were drifting out here on the skid pad, and I could see a huge difference when I turned it up to, for example, 6 or 5, or even up to 8. The car just makes you feel like a drift god because it controls the engine speed. So it doesn't do any of the ESP kind of controls. It's basically just the throttle control. But pretty useful feature. It also has a lap timer. So again, really useful features for the track. All right, let's take a look in the back seat. 510 horsepower, but still 4 doors. So you gotta love that. Getting inside is not that difficult, to be honest. I mean, the roof is not as high as, of course, in like the X3, but it's still a very functional sedan, very 3 Series. The seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'8", or about 1.73 meters. I have enough leg room to just about slide my feet under the front seat, although they're touching. Knee room is not too bad. In fact, if you have the bucket seats, because they're so thin, there's a little bit more room. But I would say if you're not going to be doing track days all the time, the standard sports seats are at least comfortable enough for longer journeys. Headroom is plenty. Of course, I'm sitting at the edge. But if you kind of lean towards the right a little bit, then you get plenty more. I have my own dedicated, or rather the rear has its own climate zone. Both these seats have heating. There's a lot of options for these features, so it really depends on the configuration that you choose. A couple USB-C ports as well. Door pockets on the side, as you can see, with some ambient lighting, that silver inlay. And back here, the middle has a nice perforated finish. Pretty good bolstering on the side here as well to keep the occupants in place, as they should be if you're going to be driving spiritedly on a racetrack. Isofix points for the outside 2 seats only, and a ski hatch, but no center armrest. But at least there is a 3rd seat here in the middle. Let's take a look in the trunk. So in the M3, you get 480 liters. In the M4, you get 440. So not much of a difference. An automatic tailgate, which I think is not that necessary, but hey, that's just my opinion. It's very rectangular over here, so it means you can load items easily. The wheel arches don't impede too much, and where they do, you have been given a nice little cubby with a net to secure some smaller items. There's tethering points as well. You have latches here to decouple the rear seats. However, they don't tumble down on their own, which is, I think, a bit of a shame. But when you do get it down, you'll see that they fold completely flat.
All right, we're here in the Autobahn with the M3 competition. Let's put our foot down because it's unrestricted. We're going to push the M1 button, floor it, go to the high-speed lane. Oh, bam! That's 180, 190 right there. This engine is a gem. It's so energetic. It's so lively. This is not the X-Drive, the 4-wheel drive. It's just rear-wheel drive. But that M-Active differential just grips and goes. There's so much traction. Oh, and this engine is so reactive. There is no turbo lag. That's just a rumor these days, especially here in BMW M performance cars. And even though this is not necessarily that quick, the noise insulation is not too bad. The suspension is also fairly soft. Of course, I'm in M1, so the suspension is in the full comfort mode. And this is actually kind of good for high speed because it doesn't feel very jiggly. It's a little bit more composed because of that compliance. The engine sounds great on the inside. So definitely true to its predecessors, the 6th gen, is also an Autobahn missile. So, as expected, in the comfort mode, the suspension is fairly compliant, so it soaks in all the sharpness out of the bumps, and in fact is very comfortable. The steering also is pretty heavy and gives you good confidence here on the Autobahn, and you want a heavier steering wheel when you're going faster, so gives you good confidence. But the seats are also fairly comfortable. They're of course a little bit more stiffer, but BMW seats on the whole, I always find them to be on the slightly stiffer side. It's not a bad thing, but here, these are the standard seats, so these are not the optional bucket seats, so you still have independent head restraints and so on. But they're very supportive. I do like the contour. It gives you good lumbar support. It does hold your thighs, it holds your stomach, so it holds you in place. And of course, if you turn off the M1 mode, now the engine is fairly silent. You can also turn off the exhaust. I don't know if you would want to. The sports exhaust sounds glorious. This engine really is a gem. It's one of my favorite engines. So comfortable sound insulation is fairly good. This is a carbon fiber roof up here, and it might not be the quietest 3 Series out there, but it's definitely not as loud as a pure track weapon. So don't get confused by the word competition. Yes, it is a little bit more powerful, a little bit more track, in that direction of being track focused, but it really isn't, to be honest, because you do have a lot of creature comforts. There is still plenty of sound deadening and things like that. So it is still an everyday sports sedan. Anyway, that's about it for the Autobahn. It's quiet, it's comfortable, the seats are supportive, and overtakes, forget about it. Don't have to worry at all. Just put your foot down and boom, overtake as many as you want. This car is fantastic for that.
Let's summarize today's episode. The price for the M3 starts at around 82,500. The M4 is not much different, just about 1,500 euros more. But, of course, there's a lot of options that you can add, and of course, if you get the M competition version, the M4 competition or the M3 competition, you're looking at numbers easily around 100,000 euros. So for that price, are you still getting that muscle car, that beast, the M3 that we've always known and loved? The answer is yes. It's a little bit different now because it looks a lot more different. And yeah, some areas I think could still be improved a little bit, like the steering feedback as well as the gear change. But on the whole, my recommendation would be keep it simple and then you will love it. So stick with the rear-wheel drive manual version, depending on your design and practicality preferences. I would personally take the M3, but it's up to you guys what you really prefer. But I think then you really have a gem because it's practical enough, it's engaging enough, you can drive it every day because it's so much more comfortable, and that engine, that's the real gem. So, that's my verdict. Let me know what you think. Put it down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.